2 men retired from the same firm in the same month, and one of them learned to sail. He was 58. He'd never been on a boat in his life. He bought a small secondhand thing that leaked, and he was, by every account, terrible at it. Ran it aground twice the first summer, came home sunburned and humiliated and grinning. His wife said she hadn't seen that grin in 20 years. By 63, he was crossing open water with people half his age asking him for advice. The other man kept the same chair. You'd know the chair. It faced the television. He'd sit in it by mid-morning, and the day would come to him through the screen. The news, the games, the long flat afternoons. He wasn't unwell. He wasn't poor. He had the same pension, the same decent health, the same good years theoretically ahead of him. His wife watched him get smaller in that chair, week by week, like something slowly deflating, and she couldn't have told you the exact day it started because there wasn't one. He just settled. And then he stayed settled. And the man he'd been seemed to recede into the upholstery until what was left was mostly a shape where a person used to be. Same firm, same month, same money, same age. One came alive, one faded. And here's the thing that should bother you. If you'd met them both at 55, you could not have told which was which. We desperately want the difference to be something external. We want it to be health, or money, or luck, or a good marriage, or good genes. Something you can point to, something that explains it. Ideally, something that lets you off the hook if it didn't go your way. And those things matter. I won't pretend they don't. It's easier to come alive at 60 when your knees work and the account is full. But spend time around people on both sides of this divide, and the external explanations start falling apart in your hands. You find the man with every advantage fading in a beautiful house. You find the woman with a bad hip and a small pension somehow more alive at 70 than she was at 40. The money doesn't predict it. The health doesn't predict it, not reliably. Something else is doing the real work, something quieter. And it took me a long time to be able to name it. And even now, I can only point at it sometimes. Watch the man who learned to sail. Pay attention to what he was actually willing to do. He was willing to be bad at something in public. At 58? That sounds like nothing. It is almost everything. Think about what a life does to you by the time you're 50. It makes you competent. You've spent decades becoming good at things. Your work, your role, the narrow set of skills your life rewarded. And competence is a comfortable country to live in. People respect you there. You know where everything is. You never have to feel the specific hot discomfort of being a beginner, of fumbling, of having someone younger and faster watch you fail at something simple. By 50, most people have quietly stopped going anywhere they'd have to be a beginner again, not as a decision, as a drift. The circle of things you'll attempt gets smaller and smaller, not because you can't, but because staying inside the circle is so much more comfortable than the sunburned humiliation of the leaking boat. And a life lived entirely inside the circle of what you're already good at is a life that very slowly stops growing. And a thing that stops growing doesn't hold steady. It begins quietly to die. The man in the chair wasn't lazy. I want to be fair to him. He was protecting himself from the one thing the boat required, the willingness to be a fool for a while, on the far side of 50, With no guarantee it would work out, the sailor risked looking ridiculous. The man in the chair risked nothing, and risking nothing turned out to be the most dangerous thing either of them did. There's a deeper layer here, underneath the courage, and it has to do with what you think the rest of your life is for. Somewhere around 50, a quiet question moves in, and most people never let themselves hear it clearly. The question is the interesting part of my life behind me or in front of me? It's not a question you answer once. You answer it every single morning, mostly without noticing, in the way you get out of bed or don't, in what you say yes to, in whether the day ahead feels like an opportunity or a length of time to be gotten through. And here's what I've come to believe. The people who fade are very often the people who, without ever deciding it consciously, concluded that the story was basically over, that the real chapters, the building, the striving, the becoming, were finished, and what remained was a long, gentle epilogue, a coast, a wind down. And once you decide, even silently, that you're in the epilogue of your own life, you start to behave like a person in an epilogue. You stop starting things. Why start if the story's ending? You stop reaching, because reaching is for people who think there's somewhere still to get to. The man in the chair wasn't depressed exactly. He just quietly closed the book on himself while he was still alive to read it. He decided the interesting part was behind him. And because he decided it, it became true, not as a fact about his circumstances, but as a fact about his attention. He stopped looking for the next thing, so there was no next thing, so there was nothing to look toward, so he looked at the television instead. The sailor never closed the book. That's the whole difference, and it's almost embarrassingly simple. He woke up at 58 and still, somehow, believed the most interesting thing that would ever happen to him might be on Tuesday, might be this summer, might be on the water he hadn't learned to read yet. He was probably wrong about the most interesting thing. It doesn't matter. The belief itself is the engine. The belief is what gets you out of the chair. I don't want to make this sound like it's just about attitude, like you can think your way alive with the right mindset. That's the wellness poster version, and it's a lie, and you'd be right to distrust it. Because there's something the fading ones lose that's more specific than optimism. They lose their appetites. Watch a child or watch the rare older person who's still fully alive, and you'll see the same thing: genuine appetite, curiosity about something, a pull toward a subject, a place, a craft, a question, a person. Not because it's good for them, not because it's on a list of healthy retirement activities, because they actually want it, the way you want food when you're hungry. What fades when people fade isn't usually their health first. It's their appetites. The wanting goes quiet. Nothing pulls. And a person with no appetites isn't depressed in the clinical sense. They'll tell you they're fine, and they'll mean it. They've just lost contact with the part of themselves that reaches toward things. And the reaching is the aliveness. There isn't any kind kind. To be alive, in the sense that matters here, is precisely to still want things, to still be pulled, to still have some appetite that hasn't been satisfied or surrendered. The woman with the bad hip, who was more alive at 70 than at 40, when I think about her, it's not her energy I remember. It was that she was interested. ferociously, specifically interested. In birds, as it happened, which she'd never cared about until she was 66, and a cardinal landed on her railing during a hard winter, and something in her woke up and went, "What are you?" That's it. That's the whole mechanism. Something landed on the railing, and she let herself want to know more. The appetite came back, and the appetite dragged the rest of her back to life behind it. So if you're listening to this and quietly running the test on yourself, here's the honest and slightly uncomfortable thing. It's almost never one big choice. Nobody decides on a single Tuesday to fade. And nobody comes alive in a single dramatic act of will. It happens in increments so small, they're invisible while they're happening. The fading is 1,000 tiny declines of invitation. No, I'll sit this one out. No, I'm too old to start that. No, that's for younger people. No, maybe next year. Each no is reasonable. Each no is comfortable. And they accumulate silently into a life with the appetites turned off and the book quietly closed. And the coming alive is the same process running the other direction. 1,000 tiny yeses, most of them small, most of them slightly uncomfortable. Yes, I'll try the thing I'll be bad at. Yes, I'll find out what the bird is. Yes, I'll go, even though I'll be the oldest one there. No single yes changes a life, but they compound. They compound exactly the way the no's do, just toward aliveness instead of away from it. The man didn't become a sailor because he made a grand decision to seize his second act. He became a sailor because one afternoon he said yes to a boat he had no business buying, and then yes to going out in it again after he ran it aground, and then yes again. The grin his wife saw wasn't the result of a philosophy. It was the result of 100 small yeses stacked up over 5 years until they amounted to a man who was visibly, undeniably alive. I keep coming back to the two of them because they were so nearly the same man, same firm, same month, same money. And I think about how at 55, the difference between them was almost nothing. A slightly different relationship to discomfort, a slightly different answer to a question neither of them knew they were being asked. Such a small thing at the start. And how it widened, year by year, yes by yes, and no by no, until one of them was crossing open water, and the other was a shape in a chair, and the gap between them had become the entire distance between a life and the end of one. That's the part that should keep you honest. Not that fading is some tragic fate that strikes the unlucky, but that it's the default. It's what happens when you do nothing, when you make no choice at all, when you let the no's accumulate because each one is so reasonable in the moment. Fading doesn't require a decision. Coming alive does. That's the whole asymmetry. One of them you have to choose every ordinary morning, and the other one just happens to you if you don't. The man who learned to sail is in his 70s now. His knees are worse than the other man's ever were. He still goes out. His wife told me that last summer, he took their granddaughter, 11 years old, out on the water for the first time and taught her to read the wind the way he'd finally taught himself. And the girl was bad at it, the way he'd been bad at it, and frustrated, and ready to quit. And he crouched down next to her in the boat and said something his wife overheard and never forgot. He said, "Being bad at it is the good part. That's the part where you're still becoming something. Don't rush through the only part that's actually yours. 11 years old, learning the wind from a man who didn't touch a boat until he was nearly 60. Neither of them in that moment was anywhere near the epilogue. The body keeps a schedule, the appetites don't. You can lose them at 40 and find them again at 70. And which of those happens to you is far more than we like to admit, still up to you. Say yes to the thing you'll be bad at. That's where the rest of your life is hiding.